how life has changed over the past couple of years. Health and wellness is a topic and a theme that I believe either directly or indirectly has touched all of us one way or another, whether it's our family, our friends, relatives, or our coworkers, or even team members. To that end, we've invited Hakeem Rahim here to speak with us today on a topic of mental health and wellness. Let me just give a little bit of background here. By way of background, Hakeem is the CEO of Live Breathe, which is a mental health and wellness focused consultancy that partners with schools and colleges and nonprofits and other corporations, much like Itron, to really help us and assist them in meeting their needs around mental health and wellness. And Hakeem is a graduate of both Harvard University and Columbia University. Hakeem's advocacy work has taken him around the world, and especially here in the States, to Capitol Hill to testify numerous times before a range of different committees there. Hakeem's work has also been featured in the USA Today and in the New York City mental health awareness campaigns. Hakeem, welcome. Please, if you can, we would love to hear your story and your background, and if time permits, can you leave us with just a handful of really great awareness tips, tricks, and resources for us? Hakeem, welcome to Team Itron, and we look forward to an engaging conversation with you here today. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Damien. And the first thing I would say is that COVID showed us something. This time showed us something very interesting and also something very glaring. It showed us that stigma and mental health is no longer about the other person, but stigma, mental health is about us. It's about our personal lives, it's about our personal stories, and about our personal journey. So no longer is mental health about the other person, it is about us. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share with you my journey. I'm going to share with you my journey so you can see the personal. Within the personal, there's the universal. What we're going to do is see. And I'm going to explain what that means in a little bit. But before I go forward, I want to give a big thank you to Itron for addressing this issue, addressing this topic. Not every organization, not every company is doing this. So thank you so much for having me here. I want to thank the inclusivity team, Damien and Bianca. You two reached out to me and said, we have to address this topic. And I'm so happy that I'm able to contribute to this conversation. And then I want to thank everybody who's on this call because my personal mission, passion, and purpose is to use my gifts, skills, and talents to empower others to speak with an authentic voice. And by you being here, you're giving me the opportunity to stand in my passion and in my purpose to potentially help just one of you to speak with a more authentic voice. Whether that voice reaches you, your family member, a coworker, a friend, then our time here today has been achieved and successful. So as I said earlier, we're going to see. We're going to see things differently, see mental health differently, and particularly from a lens of inclusion, right? No longer is it about the other, we are included in mental health. And not only that, no longer is it about that crazy person, that other person. It's about a family member, it's about a friend, it's about a coworker. But the only way that we can move from stigma to more compassion, to more empathy, and then, in terms of us taking good care of ourselves, because that's where it starts. It has to start at home. The only way that we can do that is if we share. So today I'm going to share about my journey. And the power of sharing is that it shows vulnerability. Sharing creates a space for others to say, you know what, it's okay. It's okay not to have it all together. It's okay to go get help. And not everybody has to share what they're going through. But if just one person says, hey, listen, this is what I'm going through. And it's okay to get help. It's okay to talk about it. That's the space that sharing and vulnerability creates. The E. So how do we see mental health differently? How do we see it not as the other, but ourselves, and including we are part of that equation we have to educate ourselves. So what does mental health look like? Sometimes we may not know. We may not have the language to have the conversation around mental health or to even get the help that we need. So that's something we're going to touch on very briefly today, educating ourselves around what mental health and mental wellness looks like. And then finally, the other E in terms of seeing things differently is equipping ourselves. So the power of equipping, which includes both treatment as well as self-care. Treatment can look like medication, it can look like therapy, it can look like counseling, and self-care can look like gratitude, can look like meditation. And I have a 5 tips for mental wellness card. I'm going to send it over to Damien and Bianca, and if possible, they can send it out to the entire team and entire folks who are on this call. But how do we take care of ourselves? We must empower ourselves through first taking care of ourselves. And once we do that, once we accept, and that's something I'm going to talk about in a little bit, once we accept that our wellness and our well-being and our mental health is our own to take care of, we have to own it in order to get the help that we need. Really, that's where we can be empowered to help a friend, a coworker, a family member, and so on. So let's jump into that first part of seeing mental health differently, which is sharing. So I'm going to share with you my journey. I'm flipping over to PowerPoint. I'm going to cut my video.
Can see your screen, Hakeem. Thank you.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So my journey with mental illness, mental health challenges began in the fall of 1998 at Harvard University. Probably nobody has heard of Harvard University, so I'll tell you where it is. It's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that was my university of choice. Thankfully, I was able to go there, and I remember the first few weeks in school. It's the excitement of coming to campus. And this was my freshman dorm called Matthews Hall. And I remember meeting my roommates. And if you can remember the excitement and the energy of stepping onto campus for your first first 4 years of college, you know that anticipation, you know the excitement. And I had that too. However, during the first 2 weeks of school, I remember a few of my friends and I, we were going to hang out in downtown Boston. And I remember hopping into a cab with a few of my friends, and we got to where we were going to hang out. It's actually right in the shadow of the Green Monster. I don't know if anybody is familiar with the Boston Red Sox of baseball, but right there in front of the legendary stadium, we were hanging out. And I remember getting to the party, and 5 minutes after being there, my palms started shaking, and my hands got sweaty, my mouth turned dry, my stomach turned nauseous. And I turned to one of my closest friends there. I said, Kim, what's going on? I'm really not feeling well. Thankfully, she said, Hakeem, if you're not doing well, that's okay. Head back to the dorm, and we'll come check on you. So I remember that fall evening of 1998, jetting back to my dorm, climbing up my 5 flights of stairs, turning off the lights, pulling the covers over me, and shivering. And I don't know if any of you knew what was going on with me, but I was having a panic attack. Now, again, this is 1998. There's no conversation about mental health or mental illness. I just didn't know what was going on. I just knew that something was wrong. And that was really my introduction to my mental health challenges. And I'll share briefly, I was a cheerleader at Harvard University, and I'll share why I'm sharing this picture. But clearly you can see first few weeks, first 2 years of my time at Harvard, cheerleading was activity and just really enjoyed it and physically fit. And it was just a great time and part of my journey and integral to part of my experience there. Another key part of my experience at Harvard was poetry, and spoken word poetry has been a key part of my journey with mental health and mental well-being. This is the poetry book I kept from 1998 all the way into 2001. And I remember one of the first few weeks, first months into campus, I began writing spoken word poetry, and this is one of the first poems I wrote. And I wrote it and performed it inside of Lowell Lecture Hall, one of the academic buildings in Harvard campus. And I remember the excitement of being able to share my poetry, one of my current loves and loves that started back then. So the screen that you see on the left was from 1998. And then in the spring of 2000, I started writing the next screen that you see on the right. And if you can see, the handwriting is different. So I remember saying, I must continue writing. It's imperative for me to continue writing. And I would stay up probably about, only sleeping about 2 hours a night for over the course of 3 weeks. And I remember just getting up, hopping up, and I said, I have to write. And I got up writing frantically. And that's what I was writing. But again, I wasn't sleeping very much. And this is my sophomore dorm. And that's where I was writing frantically, not sleeping very much. And I remember I even think about it now, my roommate, Ian, who's actually a neurosurgeon now, thankfully he had this caring, compassionate spirit about him back then too. So I walked up to my roommate, Ian. I said, Ian, look what I'm writing. I'm writing metaphors about the universe. I'm writing philosophies. I'm writing my prophecies. And this is great, right? And I remember he looked at me kind of askewed and he said, you know, Hakeem, are you okay? I told him, I'm fine, I'm great, I'm magnificent. So clearly he saw that something wasn't right. And thankfully he did something that I always encourage when I speak to students, when I speak to family members, when I speak to employees. What I say is he called somebody who could help. He called my family members, he called my parents. And I'm based in New York, and it's about 4 hours away from Boston. And my parents drove from where they were in New York and came and got their son. I remember hearing the knock on the door. I opened the door. I said, Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? And I was really bright-eyed and excited. And my dad was kind of in a sullen tone. He said, you know, Hakeem, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. But they took me home. And the next day, they actually brought me to a psychiatric hospital where I'm from in Queens. And I remember getting to the hospital and I actually stayed there for about 2 weeks. And while I was there on the hospital ward, one day a doctor comes up to me and he says, you know, Hakeem, what you were experiencing was a manic episode. Do you know anything about that? And I said, no, I shook my head. He said, well, mania is a high part of bipolar disorder. Now, bipolar disorder is a mental illness. And what you were experiencing was racing thoughts. You were writing very fast, you're staying up. Does that sound familiar? I said, yeah. And he said, you also experienced probably depression. Depression, feeling like you can't get out of bed, like you're swimming in a deep pool of water. You may have experienced anxiety where your heart is racing. I said, yeah. Well, he said, you have a mental illness and you're going to be taking medication. Here's your meds. You're going to get a doctor once you leave here. And this is something that you're going to have to take care of for a very long time. And I was shocked because, you know, I'm this cheerleader. I'm achieving high marks. I'm voted outstanding male sophomore at my college. And now I get this shock that I have a mental illness, a diagnosable mental illness. So that was me actually 6 months after I began taking medication. And I went on to gain 60 pounds and then another 90 pounds. So the same guy that you saw was a cheerleader sophomore year, now I couldn't even hardly get out of bed sometimes. It was so, the medication so heavy. Sometimes I couldn't even make it to class. This stellar Harvard student can't even make it to class. And in fact, I ended up taking 2.5 years off from school. And I took those years time off from school, and thankfully, my family, they accepted. And thankfully, I accepted the fact that I had a challenge. And coming to acceptance is usually not that a straight line, but thankfully, I was able to come to that point very early on. And thankfully, my family members, my family, and I always show this picture of my family. My mom, my dad, and my sister, they open and affirming. So during those 2 years off, I worked, I rested. And one of the key things they said to me, they said, your job now is to get better. And when I speak to parents, when I speak to folks who struggle with mental health challenges, I say your primary job is to get better, is to learn how to manage your well-being the best you can at this point. And thankfully, my family did that. So that's a really short part of the beginning part of my journey with mental health challenges. And of course, there are ups and downs throughout that entire process. And I'm gonna share a little bit more as we go on with the conversation. But I just wanted you to get the first sense of sort of that shock of being diagnosed and of discovering where my mental health challenges began and where that journey began. But also, I want to say that my journey has a really silver lining to it. And again, it's not over; it continues, and I'll share a little bit of that in a little while. But because I was able to talk about what I was going through, and that's a key thing that vulnerability allows, that sharing allows. It gives space for saying that it's okay. It's okay if you're not doing well. It's okay if you need to get help. Because I talked about what I was going through, because I was able to reach out and get help, I absolutely knew, and moving through my journey, I always knew, for somehow, I always knew that there was hope. That even in moving through my darkest moments, I knew that where I was not who I was, and that's a mantra for me. And sometimes, I'm offering that to you. Where I am is not who I am. Because some people here may have a family member, or you even, or coworker who may be going through a low moment right now. And having a mantra, having an understanding that how I think about who I am when I'm going through my lowest moments is as important as what I do to get help. That's something that can be very anchoring, especially during your most trying times. So this is a picture of my testifying before the Congress on Capitol Hill back in 2014. I was the first person with lived experience to share about my journey and testify in support of a mental health bill in 2014 before Congress, and then again in 2016 before the Senate. And again, that opportunity to do that, and also work with students and work with adults and work with employees and companies, that would not have come unless, number one, seeking out the help. Number two, saying to myself and then to others that, hey, listen, it's okay. And then a big part, which we'll talk about, is acceptance. Because I believe acceptance is the bridge between awareness and action. So unless you accept, you may know something is wrong. But unless you take that bridge, cross over that bridge to say, you know what? There may be you can even break it down to we're working on a project. I know that this project can probably work, but I may need help. But unless you say, you know what, I'm hesitating to reach out for help. Unless you accept the fact that you need help, you may struggle with that project. Similarly, you may need help with your mental well-being, a family member, a friend, and sometimes you may not accept. Your family member may not accept. But once you have that awareness and then the acceptance, you can then move forward and get that help. And that's a key piece that I want to reiterate this afternoon. So I'm going to pause the sharing there. I'm going to turn my camera back on and move forward. So as we talked about, sharing is a key and integral part of seeing mental health differently. The other piece with seeing mental health differently is education. So knowing what mental illness looks like. So we're going to talk briefly about what is mental health and what does mental illness look like. So each mental health challenge has three components. Let me say this. So first, each mental health challenge, we all have challenges. Everybody gets sad. But does that mean you have a depressive disorder? No. Everybody gets nervous. You have a big presentation coming up. Your son or daughter's recital that they've practiced and practiced, and you work with them practicing for, and you're actually anxious yourself. You get nervous too. We all get nervous. But here's the difference. How do we know there's a difference between a mental health challenge and everyday occurrence? So the key thing to note is that duration. So if you're experiencing a challenge that lasts for 2 weeks or longer, intensity. So how intense is it? Is it impacting various areas of your life? So is your sadness impacting your work? Is your sadness or inability to sleep impacting your interactions with your kids, interactions with your family members or friends? So when you start to see that your condition, again, is impacting multiple areas of your life, you then have to notice, well, maybe there is a challenge going on here. And the other piece around noting if there's something wrong versus everyday challenges is dramatic changes in behavior. So key things to look for. Number one is, am I sleeping too much or sleeping too little? Am I eating too much or eating too little? Those are some common signs of behavioral changes. Was I a star performer at work and getting my projects done on time, and now it's a little bit more difficult to do that? Well, then there may be a challenge there as well. Where my interactions with my children, were they, did I enjoy coming home? Did I enjoy that? But now we see that there's a 2 weeks or more, dramatic changes in behavior and then intensity. That's when you may want to start looking to seek help, right? So that's a key thing, those three components. And then mental health. So your mental health and mental well-being, what does it look like, right? So mental health impacts, one, your cognition, so how you think. It impacts, two, how you feel, so your emotional state. It impacts your physiology, so your entire body is impacted by your mental health and mental well-being. And then it also impacts your behavior. So as we talked about before, dramatic changes in behavior. So what does that look like? So if you're depressed, and it's very important to note, because even me, I'm a mental health speaker. I've been talking about mental health for a decade. I've been traveling and managing my mental well-being for over 20 years. I can even sometimes miss certain signs that I need additional attention to my mental health. So it's important, as you're learning to notice and note your mental well-being, that you have some key tips and key signs. A great website to look at, whether you're in the States or otherwise, is National Alliance on Mental Illness. So that's NAMI.org, so NAMI.org. And that's a great place to start if you're looking for basic information around mental health, basic information and resources. So for instance, physiology. If you are depressed, it might feel like you're swimming in 20 feet of quicksand because you're experiencing lethargy. That's part of the impact of depression. You may feel like you want to cry at the drop of a dime. You may feel like you're always watching a sad movie and just want to cry at any point, right? But you're not. It's just an emotion that feels like it's going to overwhelm you. So it's a deep sadness that can come up as an emotion. Cognition, your thoughts, it may go into a loop or go into a negative cycle. Sometimes it may even say, I don't belong here. I'm not good enough. Nothing I do is ever good enough. And I want to pause here and talk about that thought, that cognition piece, particularly around depression, because that can lead to suicidal ideation. As we know, according to the CDC in America, suicide is rising among many populations. Almost all populations are seeing an increase in suicidal behavior or ideation. And I wanted to really take a moment and pause and identify that, number one, just like you were having the flu, you will have a variety of symptoms, right? What would it look like? You may not want to get out of bed. You may not want to eat. You may have a temperature. Similarly, if you experience a physical illness, when you're experiencing a mental illness, there are key components to that illness which impact, again, your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, your emotions. So if you're thinking, or you or a family member or friend are having those thoughts, having those, particularly the thoughts, know that is not who you are, that is not who they are, that is the condition. Just like the flu, you would have particular series of symptoms. Similarly, with the mental illness, particularly depression, you'll have those type of thoughts. And again, as I mentioned before, how we think about what we're going through and who we are is just as important what we go through. One of the things I always share is that, there's nothing wrong with me. There may be something wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. There is something wrong. And I think that brings in a lens of compassion. That brings in a lens of humanity. And then if we can have that for ourselves, which is very hard to have, I can be the first one to tell you that. But if we can have that for ourselves and then extend that to a coworker, a friend, or a family member, we may be more open to helping them get help. There's nothing wrong with you. There may be something wrong. And we're going to talk about what we can do for our well-being as we're seeing mental health differently, as we equip ourselves. So I'll share with you a quick story. My wife and I have been married for 4 years now. And my wife and I, we recently bought a house, and we're going to be moving in soon. I'm very candid about my journey, because it also, again, that brings that vulnerability. But when we were living in an apartment a few years back, I remember I called my wife the sun. She's not the sunshine, she's the sun. She really lights up. She brightens the whole room, the whole space. So one Saturday morning, I had a speaking engagement later that afternoon, and we pop up, and she's like, "Let's go get some breakfast. Let's go down to the diner and get some breakfast." And I said, "Okay." So I got up, and in the morning I have a particular routine that I do with journaling and meditation. And I got out of bed. I felt heavy. I felt like there were weights around my feet. I felt like I had to peel myself up off of the bed. But I said, okay, let me take a moment and do my morning routine. So I did my morning routine, and in the middle of there, I just felt like a heaviness and emotional wave come over me. And I realized, like, wow, I didn't really sleep well last night. There were a couple of nights that I didn't sleep very well. And now I'm feeling like a crying at the drop of a dime. Something popped on in my head. I said, oh, wow, maybe I'm experiencing some low moments of blues, like some mild depressive symptoms. So what I did, I went to my wife. I said, you know what? Maybe it's not the best thing for me today to go to the diner. I'm really just not in the mood. Plus, I have to speak a little bit later. So she said, that's fine. I'll bring the food back, and we'll hang out at the apartment. We'll eat here. And in her doing that, what I was able to do is I was able to sit, take some time to do my self-care routine, and then ultimately came back. We had a great breakfast, and we laughed, and I was able to move forward in my day and then come back home and rest. And the reason why I'm saying all of that is, number one, I had the education. I could kind of do a self-assessment and look at, okay, well, oh wow, this is what I'm experiencing. These are the symptoms that I'm experiencing. Again, there's nothing wrong with me. There may be something wrong. And what was wrong was I was experiencing some blues. I was experiencing not a full depressive episode, but I was feeling a little low. And what I was able to do was talk about it. So I had the language. I had the language to talk about it, but also the attitude that it was okay. So I shared with my wife. I shared with somebody that wasn't, I trusted, and she's open to helping. And I asked for help. I said, I can't do this right now. What is another alternative? And she was able to help me. And then obviously there's hope. What I did was I used my self-care practices that I've developed in order to move forward in the day, go do my passion and purpose, and come back home and then rest again. But the only way I was able to do those things, number one, is that I had the knowledge that this is what depression looks like. This is what anxiety looks like. Now, again, I'm going to be very honest. It doesn't always go like that. Sometimes I go for, a few days, few weeks with missing anxious symptoms recently. So it's not just very cut and dry, like, oh, I know these symptoms. I can magically know when I'm experiencing a mental health challenge in this moment and go get help. It's not like that. I'm going to be very honest. But if, again, keeping in the back of your mind that if you feel off, there may be something wrong. It might be your diet. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the equip section, how you can be equipped to see your mental health and mental well-being differently. But hopefully that's helpful in terms of knowing why education is important, knowing why you're able to share and talk about it, and having folks around you who are educated. My wife is educated on it because it was an intentional thing for us to understand what I may experience because I have a tendency towards depression. And that's so important as well, to have the people closest to you be educated on it as well. And again, in terms of education, one of the things I should have said at the outset, this conversation is beginning of an educational process, maybe for some of you, but also for this organization. As we said, COVID made everybody realize that we have to address our mental well-being. And like anything, education is a process. And this talk in of itself is the beginning of that process where we individually, but also we as collective organizations can begin to say, there's more I need to know. There's more I need to learn. There's a different way I need to be in order for me to get the help that I need to be a better coworker, better employee, better friend, better boss, better manager, but also just a better person and a better individual. And one of those things is education. So after you share, being vulnerable, which I did, and not everybody has to do, but do seek help, do talk about it if you do believe you're going through something. Not only when you educate, you also have to be empowered to equip yourself with the tools that you need. And one of the things I shared before is I had the mental health tools, mental wellness tools, and I'll go through some of those. But I'll also share now some of the things that happened last year for me and my family. So last year, COVID was, this time of COVID has really shown that we have to take care of ourselves. We have to prioritize our well-being. And for me too. So last year, my wife and I, we purchased a home the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And 5 months later, it was destroyed by a fire. A month and a half prior to that, my wife and I unfortunately experienced the tragedy and loss of a miscarriage. Then after that, in the beginning of August, we both experienced COVID. Then she was hospitalized briefly, and then I was hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital due to the anxiety produced around COVID and not sleeping. So I was hospitalized for 3 days. Then at the end of the year, in October, we experienced the loss of her father, who was on hospice. So within the span of 1 year, we experienced some significant life challenges. And I experienced in particular being hospitalized. And the reason why I'm sharing that is that I was equipped with the tools. I was equipped with the education to know how to handle these significant challenges, which would be significant for anyone, but in particular for somebody who has a predisposition to mental health challenges. So when I say equip, what does that look like? What does that mean? What does equipment mean? So there are a couple of components I talk about and I share from personal experience, but also from research and other experts in the field that are essential for seeing mental health differently, seeing yourself differently, and most importantly, taking good care of yourself and friends and family via how you're doing. So the first is the clinical end, the treatment. So if you're experiencing a mental health challenge, again, 2 weeks or longer, we all have our highs, we all have our lows, but 2 weeks or longer, and you feel that additional support is needed, one element of treatment is counseling. So we talk about therapy. And therapy is a key and essential component of thinking through your thoughts, your emotions, because cognitive behavioral therapy, a very popular and effective form of time-limited therapy, what that does is looks at your thoughts, your cognition, and your emotions and your behaviors. So how do your thoughts influence your emotions and influence your behavior? And that's a very, very effective modality of therapy, which is good for treatment. So therapy is important. And one of the things I always say, it's like, therapy is like a relationship. Just because, one relationship doesn't work, you don't throw out having any relationships, right? Similarly, if you're looking for treatment, looking for help, if one therapist or one practitioner doesn't work out, seek another practitioner. Understand the nature of that relationship, which is to help you process your thoughts, your feelings in a safe space in order for you to become a better person, be able to manage your well-being in a more comprehensive way. Find a new therapist, and that's difficult too. So I'm not going to minimize the challenges in finding a practitioner that works with you and you work with them well. But therapy is a key component for equipping yourself. Another component for equipping yourself is medication. Not everybody talks about it. I don't, I'm not a proponent for or against, but I do share that medication is part of my overall wellness routine. And how we think about what we're going through is as important as what we go through. So I know that I am not my medication. My medication is here to help and assist and support me in leading the life that I deserve to lead, right? So I'm not my medication. They do not define me. But each day I have to have that acceptance, right? Have to accept the fact that I'm not broken, I'm not bad, I'm not wrong. This is a tool. This is a piece of equipment, a tool in my toolbox for my overall mental health and mental well-being. So medication works for many people. And that, along with medication, is another practitioner called a psychiatrist. Obviously, and their primary role is to help with medication. And then, of course, there are groups, counseling groups, peer groups, support groups. The power of speaking with somebody who is going through something similar to you. And I know there are programs, the EAP programs, that may have access to some of these some of these tools that we're talking about. Somebody that's going through what you've been through, or a little bit ahead of you, or that you can speak into once you're doing well. Having a support group is so powerful. And I've used them in my journey, in my mental health and mental well-being journey. And I've also been able to mentor others. And that's such a powerful aspect of healing, to know that you're not alone, but also to know that you have agency and you know more than you think, and helping others. So that's a component there, the clinical component, treatment. And also we have the self-care. So what does self-care look like? There's so many practitioners and researchers out there that talk about diet and exercise. Diet and exercise alone, practitioners and experts say, can manage some of the most serious mental health challenges, right? So diet for me, what that had looked like for many years. And again, this is sharing the individual, the personal, again, to assist in showing, the universal. So how can you or a family member begin to adjust various components of your life so you can have that well-being, areas of well-being? So diet is very essential and important. And in fact, speaking to one of my nutritionists and practitioners who's educated on traditional Chinese medicine, Western medicine and diet, she indicated here are some foods and supplements you can add to your diet, which can help stabilize your anxiety, stabilize your depression. And that has been very helpful over the past several months. So looking at your diet and how food impacts your well-being is so essential. So diet for your mental health and mental well-being as part of your self-care. Exercise. It is said that exercise can decrease anxiety, decrease depression. And I'm wondering how many of you have a exercise routine and a well-being and a food regimen and routine that can be helpful for your overall well-being. So exercise is critical and important component for my overall wellness. Right? So along with exercise, there is affirmations. So that's a key component for well-being that I use all the time, because again, it's not only what we're going through, it's also how we think about ourselves and how we see ourselves in relation to the world. So affirmations as a toolkit. And I'm sure many of you already have some toolkits that you use, tools in your toolkit that you use already. Meditation. So meditation is so powerful. John Kabat-Zinn is a powerful meditation teacher and practitioner, mindfulness practitioner, John Kabat-Zinn. And he's a practitioner that I followed for many years. Tara Brach is another one for mindfulness, and Jack Kornfield. So there's so many practitioners out there that you can take a look at. And of course, there's some applications, Calm, and a variety of tools that you can use for your meditation and focusing and centering your mind. And a particular part of cognitive behavioral therapy is looking at how my thoughts influencing my emotions, which are then influencing my behavior. And a key component to that is noticing what we're thinking, noticing our bodies, how we're feeling in our bodies, which is a key component for our self-care and mental well-being. So meditation. A couple other key components for self-care is, number one, doing something that you love. What we found, during this time is that sometimes we may not have the time to give attention to the things that make us feel good. But if we do have that time, if we can identify some of those things that can decrease stress levels, cortisol levels, that can decrease the opportunity, will increase how well we're sleeping, really tending toward things that make us happy, literally. So is it going for a walk with your dog, making sure you do that twice a day? Could it be simply sitting down doing a crossword puzzle, reading? What is it that a simple thing, it doesn't have to be big, but a simple thing that can begin to allow you to tend to yourself in a way that makes you happy? That's a big part of self-care as well. And then connecting with others. That COVID showed how important that interpersonal connection is. And that's a challenge for me. That's a challenge for everybody right now. But making sure you give a call to a friend. Now, folks are being able to kind of come back together and in a safe way, seeing the importance of that, reaching out to connect with others is so important for your mental well-being and your self-care. So again, that's a bit of an overview to us being able to see mental health differently. Seeing mental health not as the individual who is crazy, not as the other person, but seeing mental health and mental well-being as ourselves. Again, the CDC says that each of us on every single day is on a spectrum of our mental well-being. You may be, feeling well one day, but you may, kind of slide down the scale where you may be feeling a little bit more challenged emotionally, maybe in your thoughts, maybe not sleeping as well, but not in a disordered way. And you may be on that other end where you have more significant challenges. But what we've seen is that on the spectrum, we are all existing on there. And I want to share one other thing before we close out. And I remember in 2013, when I first decided to start speaking openly about my journey, I remember calling up one of my friends, my roommate Ian, one of my best friends. I called him up and I remember very clearly, it was a spring day, and I wanted to tell him and have a conversation about our experience together 13 years earlier, which we had never formally talked about. So I called him up and I said, hey, Ian, I want to have a conversation. He's like, okay, Hakeem, what we want to talk about? That's a weird way to start off our conversation with me, a chat. So I said, you remember, what we went through together 13 years ago? We never really talked about it. He said, we really never have. And we ended up having a great conversation. We ended up, sharing some, clearing the air, something that was between two best friends who was also my best man at my wedding. Not talking about my mental health challenge, not talking about how he experienced my mental health challenge with me, right along with me. But because of shame, because of stigma that I held, and maybe he held as well, and the society held around us, it was hard for two friends to talk about a significant and major experience that they both had because of that challenge. And thankfully, we were able to have that conversation. And thankfully, I'm doing well. He's doing well. And thankfully, we were able to have this conversation today. And I know that this is a first step in overall for not only Itron but us as individuals, because we have to own our mental well-being as well as individuals as well. So again, how do we see it differently? Share, educate, and equip ourselves, and ultimately, so we can be our best selves. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. There may just be something wrong. So again, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to throw it back over to Damien and Bianca. And again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to share, do my passion, my purpose, and contribute to the great work that your team is doing, really to bridge and show that inclusivity is not only looks one way, but it can be an intersection of things. And the more that we can see that we're all human beings and we all have challenges, the better off that we'll be as individuals, co-workers, employees, bosses, companies, but all, most importantly, human beings. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Wow, Hakeem, very powerful story and message that you shared with us here today. My heart has received your message, and I've taken about 5 pages of notes myself, and I'm just really touched by many of your messages here today. Where I am is not who I am, and so for me, I really hear those messages, and I just want to say thank you so much for helping us start on this journey. Many of us are on this journey. And so I really appreciate you taking the time today to share this message, share the story, and the journey to wellness. So team, thank you again for investing in this time here today. And then hopefully, we can take this message and inspiration forward with us the remainder of the year as well. Hakeem, thank you again for your time. And we really, really appreciate having you with us here today. With that said, Team Itron, thank you so much for joining. And I appreciate all of you so very much. Thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.